I'm Ashley,
And I'm Jasmin.
and you're tuned into Ham Radio Stranger Things podcast.
It's a ham radio.
The Cadillac of ham radios.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to yet another episode of Ham Radio as Stranger Things podcast. We've got a great episode for you today, as usual. But first, we have a little housekeeping to take care of, and I'm going to turn it over to Jasmin to let you know where you can find us on social media and where you can listen to the podcast.
Thanks, Ashley. You can find us on Instagram at Ham Radio Media, all one word, on Twitter at HamThrough, on YouTube at Ham Radio Media, or using our handle HamRadio1983. We also have a Discord you can join, which is linked in the description of this episode. If you have a fan theory or question you want to share, you can email us at hamradiomedia@gmail.com. Ashley also has a fanfic on AO3 entitled Stranger Things College, which is also linked in the description. The podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and much more. If you like the show, please consider leaving us a rating or review. We have a lot of totally tubular stuff coming up, so be sure to follow us on social media to keep up with the podcast and all of our new content.
And welcome back to another episode of Ham Radio and Stranger Things podcast. Today, we will be sharing with you our favorite and least favorite Stranger Things theories, including some for Stranger Things Season 5, as seen on places like Twitter, Reddit, Tumblr, Discord, YouTube, etc. You know, the internet. Of course, there are hundreds, perhaps even thousands of theories about the show that have been pondered throughout the years, but we will today only be discussing, our top five favorite, top five least favorite Stranger Things theories. It would probably, like, we'd be here probably 12 hours if we went through all of them, as well as some other Stranger Things nuggets that have been on our minds lately. But before that, we just wanted to address some things we gotten from some of our listeners. So recently, we've received some questions regarding our script series, which we break down and analyze the script for the Massacre at Hawkins Lab episode. But don't worry, it has not been discontinued. There's just a lot of research time that goes into, um, recording the episodes for that series. And Jasmin and I, we haven't had as much time here lately as we normally do for the script series. But we will pick it up soon. So make sure you're following us on our socials to keep up with updates on that and all of our uh, podcast content and Stranger Things content. So with that, it's time for our favorite and least favorite Stranger Things theories. So we're going to dive into our favorite theories first. Jasmin, I will let you take it away.
Thanks, Ashley. So we were talking about this before we started recording, but I think we both had an easier time coming up with our least favorite theories that we've seen than our favorites. And of course, once we looked at each other's, we're like, oh, I also want to talk about that one. So, the inspiration abounds. So these are in no particular order. These are just the ones that came to mind while, I was thinking about this and seeing yours as well. So these are just kind of the ones that came to mind for me. I'm sure we'll finish recording and then I'll think of like a bunch of ones I wanted to talk about, but we'll see how it goes. So I'd say my first one of my top theories is that Will has powers. I'm one of the believers. Part of what I think will happen in season 5 is I think that he and Elle will wind up teaming up to save the day. I think that, as we saw in season 4, we're always seeing him touch his neck, which is similar to where the Satyria tracker was implanted on Henry. And so I think there's something up with that. I think there's a connection there. What kind of powers he will have, I don't know. I don't think they're the same as 11. Like they established in the earlier seasons that some of the kids can have different powers. So I don't think they're the same, but I think them teaming up to save the day is key. I know there are people out there who think that like Will is going to be the focus. I don't believe that. I think that him and Elle are going to team up to save the day, but Elle is still going to be the focus. She's the more powerful one. She's kind of the key there. But I do think they will be kind of assisting each other in some way. Um, and I also wonder, just after what we saw in season 4 about the upside down being stuck on the day Will disappeared, and how it differs from what we saw in season 1 and what we saw in the flashbacks. That I think maybe part of what we're seeing there is Will's influence. He got stuck down there for like a week. He survived longer than anybody else did. And there's a lot of theories as to why is it stuck there? Why does it look like it did the day Will disappeared? And I think part of the reason is that Will subconsciously was somehow controlling things in the upside down. They were kind of mimicking what he remembered, his memories. We know he was singing his favorite song, and we know there's a connection between memories and songs and what Vecna is doing in the upside down. So I definitely think that may have played a role. And I also be interested if his powers turn out to be about him having just his powers being like a connection to the upside down, him being able to control things down there, including like the creatures that live there, like Vecna can, or it's possible both him and Elle have somebody that they have to unlock somehow. I also think it's possible. I've seen, I think it was the Hellfire Collective that put this theory forward first. That's the first time I heard it. Is that the theory that the creatures that live in the upside down may be peaceful, but are being aggressive because of Vecna's control? Because you see with Dart, when Dustin has him, that he, apart from eating Muse, he seems otherwise peaceful. And so when he reconnects with the hive mind, that he seems to kind of go rogue in that sense. And so I think it's possible that if they're only being aggressive because they're under Vecna's control, if Elle or Will can somehow break that control, they that could be part of the key, breaking that control, so these creatures that are could be otherwise peaceful are no longer attacking them, or fighting to get that control back. Because in the flashbacks we see that Henry shows, there's these creatures are out there, they appear to be eating vegetation, and so people are like, could they be vegetarians, could they be peaceful, and they've just been kind of corrupted in this way. And so I definitely think that's possible. As with all my upside down theories, I'm totally open to being wrong if something else is true. I'm good with that too. But I do think that like the way the upside down looks has something to do with Will's influence and the fact that he got stuck there for so long in season 1. I also think how this happened will be reviewed through flashbacks. We've gotten indicators through the behind the scenes pics that we are going to be seeing flashbacks of some kind for Will. I think that will also happen for 11. And so I think there's some kind of a connection there, between what Will is experiencing and what hasn't been revealed to us, and him possibly having powers or his influence, and how him and Elle are going to have to kind of like team up and save the day. So that's one of the big theories I subscribe to about season 5. Another theory that I have is I think 11 just will be introduced for Will in season 5. Long-time listeners will have heard me talk about this before, and I do think if that does happen, we will see that relationship. I also think we're going to see Robin and Vicky's on screen. I think the new love interest could be a fellow classmate, someone that's new to town, and based on the behind-the-scenes pics we've now seen of Robin and Vicky at the hospital, I think we are going to have like a formal coming out for both of them. We are going to see them be accepted by the group, and that's something that wasn't really clear if we were going to get that prior to up into those recent picks, but those picks have kind of made me think that that could be something we could see. Next one is that I think Miss Kelly is up to something. Ashley, you and I've both commented on this, that we think something is up with Miss Kelly.
Yes, lots of people have. They, I mean, I think we all kind of thought it's gonna, it's gonna happen in volume 2, season 4, like it's gonna, and it didn't really, it never did. But you never know. But she was kind of, I mean, there might, we might finish season 5 and there might not be anything to do with Miss Kelly, or up with Miss Kelly. But she's kind of weird. Like she gives off some very creepy vibes, especially for a high school guidance counselor, you know?
Yeah, she does, and I feel like there are a lot of plots like that in season four where you thought they were going to come back to it, or you thought something was going to be revealed. I think a lot of us had those kind of had that thought going into volume two, and I think something that makes the ending of season four so shocking isn't just that final shot of the characters, but also the fact that I think a lot of us thought we were gonna like something was going to be revealed to us, and then it wasn't. It's like, oh yeah, we're bumping that to season five, or we might never know. So I think that's part of what made the ending so
Yeah,
shocking. And
yeah. I thought we were going to get a post-credit scene too, because I kept
yeah,
waiting
yeah.
because like I remember with season three, a lot of people didn't even watch the scene with the Demogorgon in Russia because they they turned it off because it came so much after the so long after um the episode had quote unquote ended, that a lot of people didn't even know about it, and so I kept waiting. Like I watched through the entire credits because I was like, surely. But I mean, looking back on it, over the course of since season four has been released, I kind of understand why they didn't do it because, number one, I mean, that's a very cinematic ending, the way they did it, looking at, at the hill and stuff. But also, you think about it, like if let's say, they had showed us a shot of Vecna injured or whatever, or, one of those creatures coming up, like, then you kind of have to go with it in season five. And, things change in the writer's room, Jasmine. Um, and so I get why they didn't do it, but I was so hoping that we were going to get a post-credit scene, but we didn't.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna get one too, and I think that's kind of one of the big things going to season five is how much of what we saw, what we've all been speculating on, is going to come to fruition. Is stuff going to be revealed to us, or is that just going to be a thing where we're never going to know? Or I could also see it being a case of they don't address it on screen, but they're asked in interviews afterwards, and maybe it's, yeah, we were going to do it, but we ran out of time, or that wasn't something we intended. We saw the fans talk about that, but that wasn't something we intended. And I think they've shown this is a group of writers and showrunners that if they've got the time and the ability to address something, within the plot or kind of change things up based on, what they're seeing, what people are talking about, they will. Um, but they're not going to do that at the cost of the story, or kind of the vision that they have. And I really respect that because it's one thing to be like, oh, wow, this is going in like a cool direction, or we hadn't thought of that, but that's such a great that's such a great theory. We could do something with that and kind of pandering or just pure fan service. So I really appreciate I feel like they walk that line really well. And I really like appreciate that about the show. So yeah, I definitely think Miss Kelly's up to something. I think she's either working with Vecna, either knowingly or unknowingly, or she's working with like the US military or like the bad guys in some way. Will it ever be revealed? We do not know. I hope it will be because, they put a lot of focus on her in season four. Um, so yeah, I hope we will get some, kind of follow up there. Another one of my theories, we've talked a lot about who we think Linda Hamilton could play. My current favorite theory is that she will play a love interest for Murray, and that she will turn out to be either a local farmer whose property they need to use, or a journalist in town covering the earthquake. Um, because they seem to be filming a lot at the farm, this farm location. We don't know whose farm it is. People said it's be like the McCorkle farm, but we don't know officially whose farm it is. And before I was kind of leaning, like, actually, I know you have your theories. People said, somebody with the U.S. military. They've said, Brenner's ex-wife, and if that turns out to be true, I'm cool with that too. I just think that she must have some kind of connection to either the farm or one of the existing characters, or a potential connection, because she's in the main cast photo. It's clear they wanted to cast her for season five for some reason, like something specific, I mean. um so I feel like she must be tied either closely to an existing character or to the farm or to both, in order to integrate her into the story, because they have a limited amount of time in which to, if they're bringing in a new character, or couple. They kind of got to do that within the first couple episodes. Otherwise, there isn't enough setup time for them to really feel authentic. So to me, she has to have some kind of connection to the present, you know? Um,
Yeah. I
so
mean,
that's
um, from my understanding, she's filmed quite a bit, so
mm,
I definitely think she's not, you know, it's not a Robert England thing of,
yeah.
you know, she asked them. I mean, we know that they reached out to her, so I feel like her character's pretty important to the season.
Yeah.
Uh, I really hope that she's not, a military character, because to me that would be kind of like typecasting her in a way, because the Terminator films and what she's really known for. Um, I would love to see her be, something connected to the lab from the past, or um, just an ally on their side, or maybe a villain, but not, or not really a villain, but an antagonist, who's not associated with the military, or the government.
Yeah, for sure. I would also like to see her play something different. Especially since I've done that with other people they've cast, right? We saw that with Bob and with Brenner and with, Joyce and Hopper, like, the actors playing them are playing different roles than the ones they're best known for. I mean, to a certain extent, not somewhat close with others, but do you know what I mean? Like they have the show I feel has a good history of being like, you're expecting this and we're going to give you this instead, which I think is really cool to see them play, you know? And of course they can't do it every time, but I would also like that, if she is going to be a villain, I would prefer to see her not be a villain. But if she is going to be one, be a different villain than what people are expecting. I'd like to see them play with expectations there, same as you. And then like the last kind of major, one of my very kind of top major theories that I have is, I think the show will probably wrap with an epilogue set in the 90s. I know other people have, put that theory forward. I've seen people kind of say, oh, they think, the show's going to skip ahead of the 90s an earlier point. And I don't think that's going to happen just because the 80s and the aesthetic of the 80s is such a key part of this show. I think skipping ahead too far too soon would kind of ruin the aesthetic. And for the behind the scenes pics we've seen, it looks like they are very much coming back to the season 1 and 2 aesthetic. Very much they've talked a lot about bringing it full circle, bringing it home. The outfits we're seeing the characters wear, the locations feel reminiscent of season 1 and 2, but like a more mature version, which I'm really excited for because, I like seasons 3 and 4, but, as the writers about right said, those were very different aesthetics. The season 3 was the summer blockbuster. Season 4 was out having all these like mini movies and the different aesthetics. And I'm really excited to see like a return to form. And so I think moving ahead any far like outside of the 80s, I think would kind of ruin that. And so I think, are we going to see them jump ahead to the 90s? Yeah, I think we will. But I'm expecting more of like an epilogue thing where, everyone gets their happy ending and, all the relationships we've kind of seen thus far get together or stay together. We'll see them happy. We've got, Joyce and Hopper. We've got, Steve and Nancy, who looks like they've set up at this point, Lucas and Max, Mike and Elle, Robin and Vicky, Dustin and Susie, just, kind of everything they've set up by this point, we kind of see it to fruition. We kind of see it to its end point. I feel much stronger about an ending like that than I do. People are like, everyone's gonna die, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really buy that. Um, so and even just simple things like we see Joyce and Hopper get married, and the Byers move to a nice new house in town. We get a flash forward to see like the gang getting together for the holidays with their spouses and partners and kids. Something nice like that, where I think having a lot of action and mystery and just what made this show so iconic and so cool to begin with, having a season full of that and then kind of bringing it home to, we flash forward a few years and we see kind of, where people wound up. I'm hoping for an ending like that because I think the trend of like everybody dies and that whole thing, I feel like it's overplayed. And in the increasingly distressing world we live in, we all need a happy ending. You know what I mean? We all need a happy ending once in a while. Those are nice.
Agreed,
Um,
agreed. I think people, especially um, you know, people in the Stranger Things fandom play too much into, well, someone's got to die, and for in order for there to be a happy ending, so they all have to die before, upside down Vecna to be defeated. Like, not necessarily. You really don't have to do that. I mean, I've talked with you about this, and I've said it on this show before many times, but to me, what would be, a bigger tearjerker would not, you know, necessarily be watching a character die, although that would be very sad, but would be, just a very, sweet, tender, moments between our characters at the end with, a nice, piece of sad score music in the background. And, to me, that is more, it pulls more out my heartstrings than, uh, you know, watching a character die, unless it is, a beautiful, moment. Like for example, I kind of thought the moment between Max and Lucas when she was, quote unquote dying. Well, she did technically, clinically speaking, die. I thought that was very beautiful. It was very touching because it's like, wow, like she really is dying. Um, and I think that if you took, a death scene of like it's something quick, like that's not meaningful to me, especially if it's a main character. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you on Jasmine, with you on that, Jasmine. Um, I mean, I didn't even bother to put that one in my, least favorite theories, but there's just no real point in really, beating a dead horse about that.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think because some of the deaths have been so quick, like you blink and miss it, like finding Barb's body, Jason, you know what I mean? Like some of them have been like so quick. Like I've had conversations with friends where or I see a post go by on the internet and people are like, did Barb actually die? And they're like, yes, they saw her body in the upside down. They're like, but when? Or I had a friend who the friend I normally watch her, she was in the States, and she was like, wait, when did that Jason guy die? And I was like, he got cut in half with the earthquake. And she was like, oh, I must have like looked away at that moment, like, you know what I mean? Like, so like, I must have been grabbing a snack. Like, you go down to eat a chip at the wrong moment and you blink and miss somebody's death. So I think some of
Yeah.
the ups, yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually noticed when Jason died, and I know, a few people who didn't at first, because it happened so quick. But I noticed it, and even though he did very awful things, I mean, I actually, was that scene kind of affected me, Jasper, because, it. I mean, I wasn't expecting that to happen, and it did, and I'll be honest with you, it really did kind of it was kind of tough for me to watch.
Yeah, it is a very intense, emotional tearjerker of a scene. Because I mean, you have like Max dying and Lucas freaking out, and then there's that meme. It's like, and you get what Jason get cut in half like sliced cheese. He's just like a grilled cheese sandwich. He's just there he goes. And you're like, whoa. So it's very intense. You go from
Yeah,
like
and it wasn't that he just got cut in half, but like if you notice,
he
after it
dissolved.
happened, yeah, and
He
that's what's
dissolves into
so
the
worse
upside
about
down.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like really
and
gory.
yeah, and it's like, when people, I remember when people had the theory about Hopper at the end of season three, like how he, got over to Russia, like, oh, he just jumped in through the portal, and walked through the upside down, and looking back on it, it's like, yeah, if he had done that, he literally would be dead because it would have disintegrated him pretty much.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me when like the new Star Wars movies came out, and you have Harrison Ford's lines like, "We're gonna use the Force." That's not how the Force works. It's like,
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not how the upside down works. Doesn't work that way. He didn't jump into a portal. You do that, you die. Unless you're Vecna, apparently. But it seems to what's the word for it? Flambe.
Yeah.
Everybody else.
Well, well, I mean, I guess I don't really know what happened. I hope that is something that I hope is addressed in season 5 of like we saw Henry, disintegrate into ashes, but yet he, as he even himself said, you is that much alive, and he is. But yeah, I mean that's something I hope is addressed in season 5. If not for plot's sake, just because I'm curious.
Yeah, me too. I hope that also does get addressed. Like to me, one of the big kind of mysteries is that okay, we have these rules that apply to everyone except for Henry, Will, and Elle. Like everyone else gets like flambéed. Hopper gets taken out by the vines, and he's down in a few minutes. Will survives for a week. Elle can come and go as she pleases. Henry gets sucked down there, and he does not get flambéed. So like, do you know what I mean? Like there seems to be like these rules apply pretty consistently to everybody else, except for these few characters where it's like, nah, they good. They're just they're just gonna keep on trucking. Um, so I really hope we're gonna get a kind of like an answer to what that's about basically, because there's got to be something that allows them to do that to survive, where it takes out other people so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will we don't know. So I thought I'd wrap up my favorite theories with some honorable mentions. So in no particular order. I'm a believer that Dr. Brenner is Eleven's biological father. I know they haven't said that outright, but that's kind of the implication I took away from, when Joyce and Hopper are looking into what happened to Terry and the fact that he's so fixated on her. I mean, like, this guy puts helicopters into the sky to look for 11, like over Mike's house, but somehow Kali gets all the way to Chicago. He just seems really fixated on her, and even when he's dying, he wants her to forgive him, and he sees her as family, and to the point that he justifies everything. And so I'm of the belief that there has to be something that singles her out, because we see in the flashbacks to the lab that he's coaching her, right? The other kids are laughing at her and he's coaching her, being like, they think you're weak, you need to show them. He's paying her this extra attention, and the other kids don't get it. She does not seem to be extra powerful. They don't get it. And then she shows herself to be extra powerful in the moment. And so there seems to be something that tipped Brenner off to that. And so, if he is her biological child, if somehow stuff was passed from Terry to her, like, when she was in the womb, and that they enhanced her powers. If that's the case, then, I could see why he would take a special interest in her or believe that she was more powerful. Because, I mean, it's kind of implied, but clearly that I feel like Brenner has been experimenting on himself. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's somehow able to survive a Demogorgon attack. Um, so like, we don't know what kind of weird experiments he was doing or had access to. So that's where I fall on that. And speaking of Kali, I also like the theory that she will return to help Elle defeat Vecna, that her and the rest of like the crew are going to show up to help. I can also see a scenario in which if they're somehow able to help Terry get better, that she could assist because she has powers of some kind. I don't think it's necessary to to defeat the big bad. I don't think it's necessary, but I think it would be interesting and kind of cool. I know other people have talked about how they would have liked to have seen Kali back in season 4 to kind of make the Nina project kind of work more seamlessly with the rest of the story. Like, instead of being like a Deus Ex Machina, as we were talking about with Starcourt, it would have felt more integrated if Kali had been part of it, which I hadn't thought about till they said it. And I was like, yeah, you know what? If they'd somehow found a way to connect this. So don't think it's necessary, but would think it would be cool. And lastly, that there is something up with the water supply at Hawkins. Like, there's something in the water, so to speak. We see the stuff with the vines in season 2, and we know Vecna somehow has the ability to get into people's minds, to explore their memories and their emotions. It's not clear at this point how he's doing that. To me, it's either got to be something with the water or something with the vines, like something about the physical environment in Hawkins. It's allowing him access into people's minds that he's developed over time, because Owens and Brenner talk about, okay, he's grown stronger over the years. As he kills people, he gains their abilities, their memories, all this stuff. It does not appear he had a lot of those capabilities in season one or prior to season one in order to manipulate things in Hawkins. But by the time we get to 4, he has them. And I think the implication is supposed to be that he gained these over time. And since the last time we kind of saw directly some kind of, upside down influence in Hawkins was season 2, I think there has to be some kind of a connection here. There's something about the physical environment of Hawkins that somehow he's infiltrated. Because otherwise I'm like, well, why, like what's giving him access to people's memories, to their minds, to, all of that, if it's just him getting stronger. I think there has to be more to it than that. So I think it's something about the natural environment, either like the water supply or something about like the earth, nature, the vines. Something is giving him access, and I'm really excited to find out like what that is or how that works. Presumably we're going to come back to that. I don't see how we couldn't, as I explore what how, like, basically how Vecna is doing this, which I'm really excited to kind of find out. So those are mine. What are yours, Ashley?
Well, I don't have mine aren't as quite as in depth as Jasmine's are. I've tried to find a mixture of like some of the older ones from like back even to season 1 that I feel like they haven't been yet answered in the show or addressed. So they're still technically theories at this point. Um, so my first one is Henry is Eleven's biological father. I mean, you think about it, like they kind of look alike in a way. But Jasmine, like what you were saying with Dr. Brenner and how he interacts, or how we see him interact with 11 in the flashbacks in 1979 in season 4. He singles her out, and so does Henry. Henry, I mean, pretty much interacts with her similarly to Dr. Brenner. His advice is just a little different. Um, but the principle, I think, is still the same. And, one thing that, even if, they don't address like who Eleven's biological father is, something that I do hope is addressed in season 5 is, and I feel like for whatever reason that it probably won't be, is something like that came up a lot in the flashbacks in season 4, um, of you know she's special, whatever is, she's special. You're better than the others, and it's like, I mean, yeah, that's a great pep talk, but she's not really. I mean, she really wasn't. That's not an exaggeration. I mean, I love 11. She's my top. She's my number one favorite character. But I mean, a little 8, 9 year old 11 was not who she has. We've seen her on the show in terms of her abilities. Um, and I hope something is addressed about that. Of, okay, well, what was it that really made her special? Um, you know, Prior to when she opened the first gate, after the massacre at the Hawkins Lab, what was it that made her so special? Or were you just saying that to manipulate her? Or did they really know that something really was truly different about her? And I feel like if Henry is her biological father, then that could be it, because um, he's not only the first step subject, but um, it kind of seems like at this point, based on what we know from episode 7 of season 4, that his powers are organic. Like they, I guess he came about them naturally. So, if his blood DNA is within her, I mean, I think it's possible. I've seen other theories about, they extracted, Henry's DNA and injected it into the other test subjects, when they were, um, babies or whatever. And I do think that's plausible, but I feel like if 11 literally has this man's code DNA, you know, the chromosomes and the blood DNA, that could be it. And that, a lot like um, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader in Star Wars, I think, I think that would set up something, a really even bigger showdown between the two because, 11, would be faced, with a literal choice there. Like, this man is my actual father. Um, do I really want to kill him? Or do I want to save my friends, this town, and the world, Um, and so that's kind of why I believe it. And even look, it's a theory that even if it doesn't come to pass, it'll still be in my head canon because I think it's a really good theory. My next theory is the Mind Flayer uh, was formed in Henry's image and is actually an extension of Henry's mind. That he kind of, I feel like maybe it's the dark side of his mind, that he uses because in seasons 2 and 3, especially, um, because those are the two seasons really dealing with the Mind Flayer. Um, there's a lot of mention of it being or him being activated. It only comes out, he only, wants you and needs you when he's activated. And to me, that is like, kind of a dark side, I guess you'd say, of our psychological makeup, um, about why people do the things they do, when, adrenaline or something is activated. And so I feel like, and this is theory, that I saw that came out after season 4 was released. And I just really liked it, and I hope that there is some um, validity to it and it comes to fruition. Um, and then about the upside down, kind of swaying from Jasmine a little bit on this, because I personally think the upside down looks like Hawkins because it's a photocopy of people's memories. Um, and I think, you know, Castle Byers and the Byers home and maybe the Wheelers home and stuff, could be from Will's, but then you have to take into that, well, the lab and Nancy's bedroom and all these other places and the Creel house. And it's like, well, you know, would Will have ever been to these places, Um, but I mean I didn't put this on my list for this, but um I also think maybe it's of Henry's memories because he did live in Hawkins for a time. And I mean I really do believe that, you know, during that time he could have went through all the places except for I don't know how long the lab's been there, but um there's that. And then my next theory is, and this one is an older one from post season 1, and there's actually an article um, associated with this one that I would um, like to read real quick, if I may. It's the theory is basically that the Demogorgon um, was actually part of the dark side of Elle's consciousness. Speaking of the dark side of one's mind, um, and here's the theory. So the theory goes, and this was It was on Reddit back like in 2016 about like it says that Elle is the monster, and she says it after all episode 6 she says I'm a monster. um and it says most viewers believe she was talking about her powers, but what if she meant her other half, the dark side of her consciousness, was actually the Demogorgon? um After all, when the monster disappears, so does Elle. And while others who venture into the Upside Down see it as a dark reflection of our world, Elle sees it only as black, meaning she exists in that world. And ours is a much different capacity. The people, just like um, the monster. Um, and then, uh, yeah, and then like Jasmin, I think something's definitely up in the water, for sure in Hawkins, and I've kind of thought that for a couple seasons now. And this theory again, uh, older theory, is that the water supply is drugged, and that it's basically like everything we've seen, thus far, in the show is like, people, whacked out on drugs and
Just
stuff.
on one
I
big
don't
trip,
really,
like they're on one big acid
yeah,
trip. They're just tripping out the
exactly,
entire time.
exactly.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
at this point, I don't really know, if that's the case. But that is fun. Like I mean, I could see that. But I mean, I definitely do think there is something up with the town of Hawkins, that I hope is you know addressed or something in season 5. But yeah, they basically say it's just one big acid trip. Which I mean, and the theory also goes on to include like the lab and everything that Brenner had going on there, which we know that he used um, those drugs in the MK Ultra experiments. So I mean, it could be. I mean, you know, it's that definitely seems like something Martin Brenner would do. I mean, I'm just saying, to cover his own tracks.
Yeah,
Um,
I could see that, but okay, here's a question for you. If everyone's on one big acid trip, what's actually killing people? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what actually killed Barb? Like, if they're on one big acid trip, like, did she get mauled by a bear? Like, what's actually killing people in the town? Unless they're hallucinating that? Like, I know it's not like someone else came up with this theory, but like that's the question I have because I'm like, if one big acid trip, who like what's actually causing the deaths?
yeah, rather just imagining it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean they could
I
be.
mean, I'm pretty sure that Barb is dead.
Yeah, that's my
So
thing. Like, what killed? Like, okay, if it's one big acid trip, I could definitely see them. I could see Brenda doing something like that. Definitely, I'm like, all right, one big acid trip, but like, what actually happened to these people? Because like, contrary to popular belief, most wild animals do not attack humans. Like bears, wolves, they would prefer if you left them the f alone. Thank you very much. They don't want to mess with you. You don't want to mess with them. Like, uh, the chances of you actually getting mauled by a wild animal are like so slim. So I'm just like, what killed these people? I mean, unless okay, I had a really dark thought, so I'm not gonna say it. Like, yeah, okay, I'm not gonna say it.
and then I have a couple of honorable mentions. One is a Reddit post on like the big bad, like theory for season 5. It's kind of lengthy. I'm only going to read you a few of the highlights. Um, I'll try to remember to post it in the description for the episode. But basically, um, they're basically just saying like who they think the big bad could be. Um, and so it says, in season 4 of Stranger Things, we are introduced. They call it the particle swarm. Vecna Henry/1 tells us that the swarm made him what he is, and further, we are informed that Vecna has been the motive force behind everything going on in Hawkins all this time. Um, the user contends that season 5 will, be about the particle swarm, as it is what ties Vecna, the Mind Flayer, the Demogorgon, and the Upside Down itself together. That is to say, the swarm is the big bad. While there's loads of hints, I think the symbolism of Will's painting is the strongest and most overt. In it, the party fights a three-headed red dragon, and then they kind of go through some of their observations. I'm not going to read. Um, I'm going to read all of them because there's only like 7. But number 1, for a show constructed around Dungeons and Dragons, there have been exactly 0 dragons thus far. Stranger Things creatures have been thematically rather than physically inspired by their D&D counterparts. The only canonical multi-headed dragon in D&D is Tiamat Takesis. I don't know if I'm saying right, aka the goddess of evil. She's usually multicolored and has 5 heads instead of 3, but she is also a shapeshifter and a corruptor. Note the Soviet soldiers who say that the swarm is in them. The dragon in the painting has 3 heads and is red. The party has faced 3 threats from the upside down: Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, and Vecna, which is usually depicted in red. And also, this is just me adding this, but also Vecna's Mind Layer is red. At the end of season 4, in which the painting is revealed, we learned that the 3 separate threats are in fact joined via Vecna, who was created by the swarm. And they go into Elle, Max, and Erica not being in there, which I think that's Will mostly, telling Mike that I miss when it was just the boys. But anyway, so they go on to say that Will, Dustin, and Lucas are depicted in a line with Will off to the side and towards the front. This is bizarre placement for a wizard in D&D, as they're usually glass cannons. And then Lucas is shown entering the scene on horseback. Then they kind of go into more about like why Lucas is, shown on horseback and stuff. But yeah, I mean, they basically predict that it'll be like the swarm of particles, which, I mean, if you really think about it, as we see in episode 9 of season 4, the Mind Flayer did not look like what we know as the Mind Flayer. It literally was just that swarm of particles that Henry formed into the image of what we know today to be the Mind Flayer. And, we never see his transformation into Vecna. But if I had to guess, I would dare say that, like what happened to Will, maybe Henry, in using his powers, was able to, get those particles or whatever to, I guess, insert themselves into him, and that's what's given him greater power. Because there is a big lightning storm or whatever in them, and I do think it's a great source of energy and kind of like in a spiritual thing, I guess you'd say. And so yeah, I mean, I definitely could see the swarm, the particles being a big reason that Henry is now Vecna and doing what he's doing. I mean, I definitely could see that. But at the end of the day, I still think that the Vecna himself is the big bad. Could be wrong on that. And then my last honorable mention is probably one of my favorites, because I'm probably one of the few that literally doesn't know how the show is going to end. But I feel like the ending is going to be one where we all sit back and go, after we watch it, and we'll all go, well, that was so obvious. How did we miss it throughout this show? Like, it was such an obvious ending. So those are my favorite theories. You got any thoughts on those?
I mean, I think they're all good theories. I mean, I think that, we're kind of at the stage where many things are possible. And, Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to, the Mind Flayer, Henry, the Upside Down, they've kind of left it vague enough where there's a few different ways they could go and be satisfied, you know? Same with like what's going on with the creatures, the Demogorgons, is there something in the water? Like, there's, Eleven's kind of backstory. There's a few different ways they could go and, still have it be canon, still have it make sense. Which is kind of what I like about the lore. I know the lore is like your favorite thing, and that's something I do like about the lore is that it's so, they've given us enough to speculate, but for most things, coming into the season, we don't have anything definitive. You know what I mean? We don't have anything that we can point to and be like, oh yeah, it's definitely going to be this. I mean, for some stuff we do, but for most things, it's like, yeah, could be this, could be that. I do agree that probably there's going to be something about the ending that's going to be like, oh gosh, that was obvious. Oh gosh, how did we miss that? Like it's going to be like smack you in the face, be like, oh my god, how did we miss that? It's going to be right in front of us the whole time. I definitely think there's going to be a part of the ending where we go, oh, of course, it was there the whole time. So I definitely think there'll be something about that just because they're good about dropping breadcrumbs. So I do think that will be part of it. Um, and I enjoy hearing some of the older theories because I joined the fandom, prior to season 4, so I joined later than you did. So I enjoy hearing like older theories and stuff because I wasn't a part of the fandom back then. Alrighty, it's time for me to get into my least favorite theories. Like Ashley, these were far easier to come up with
I was about to
than
say
my
the
favorite.
AKA the best part of the episode.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay.
So yeah, again, in no particular order. First off, that Vecna is not the big bad. The Mind Flayer is really in charge. Don't believe this one at all. I find it very strange. No shade, but I find it very strange that so many people for so long were convinced like that that there was something controlling the Mind Flayer because it did seem to kind of be this like anamorphous thing. It didn't seem to have a brain. It didn't seem to have, what we would consider that a brain. And something must be controlling it. And again, I joined the fandom later, so I didn't really have a strong opinion on the Mind Flayer. I wasn't around long enough to have one. But I do find it a bit strange that people who seem to, like, a lot of people seem to really prescribe to this theory, and they turned out to be right because we know that Vecna is, he created the Mind Flayer, he's controlling it, the whole thing, he has the powers. And this is all kind of like by his design that a lot of people have now switched and they're like, oh no, well, the Mind Flayer is actually in charge. He like possessed Vecna. He made him, like he went from being this like nice normal kid to like being, it like possessed him and it made him bad and they need to get it out of him. And he's the Mind Flayer's really in charge or something else pulling the strings. And I find that a bit odd because to me, like I don't really see any evidence of that. And I find it weird that people went from, oh, there's definitely something controlling the Mind Flayer to, oh no, the Mind Flayer is controlling Vecna. It almost feels like, they were right and now they want something else to kind of like claim their stake in and be like, oh, well, maybe it's actually this. Like there has to be a twist here. And listen, I love a good twist, but a twist only works if you've done the setup properly. And sometimes things just are, like not everything is a twist. Sometimes it looks like it is, and it is. Like it looks like an egg, and it's an egg. It walks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck. It's a duck. And sometimes there's a twist, and that's okay. Those are cool. But I don't think there's a twist with this one. I think Vecna is the big bad. I mean, we saw him create the Mind Flayer in the memories, in the flashbacks, and that whole thing about like, oh, like, do I think it's possible that something possessed Henry? Do I think it's possible that there's something wrong with Hawkins? Do I think something happened once they moved that like either like enhanced that or kind of exacerbated the situation? Yeah, I definitely think that's possible. I mean, when Victor talks about it, he said they had 1 month of peace in that house. So do I think something happened there or something like triggered him or set him off? Yeah, definitely. But also, from what Henry talks about, he said they moved the family out there because he thought it changed the scenery would help. And I thought it was so cool. I loved how they did this, where when you see the memories originally from like Victor's perspective, the kids look happy and, they just seem like kind of confused when weird things start happening, and Alice seems upset. And you see Virginia be upset, and you see Victor being concerned. And I loved how when they showed it from Henry's perspective, when it like zooms in on him, you see the facial expression, you see the change, you see they run it back a few minutes. You're like, oh no, he made that happen. That he's playing a role. So we don't know what set this kid off, or if maybe something had happened, less severe things had happened before. We don't really have that backstory yet. I imagine we're gonna get it or part of it as they explain what Henry's doing or how he got his powers or more of his motivations. Because we have his like basic motivations, but I think there's some stuff about his backstory that could use some more explaining. So that's where I come down on that. I think Vecna is the big bad, and as big bads go, I think he's a really good villain. And to me, I feel like saying it's the mind flayer or saying giving all that power to something else, like, oh, he's being controlled, fully controlled, I think would take away from how cool he is as a villain. Like, like something that makes him like a good villain is that like, nah, he's just evil. Like Elle tries to talk him down and he's like, nah, like he's just evil. He just feels that way. Um, so I think giving all that basically that power to another entity would kind of dilute that. I think giving part of it to something else could be possible and interesting, like something influenced him. But I think what makes Vecna an interesting villain, if you compare him to like the bullies we see, at least the first 3 seasons, that make a lot more sense, is that these are complex characters who they're acting out or bullying others because they are hurting. They are dealing with something, they are lashing out, versus a character like Vecna that's just like, it appears he was just wired wrong. It appears like he's been that way since he was a kid. And I like that they kind of show the different types of kind of quote evils we see in the world, because they're both things we that we deal with. You have like the kind of small evils you deal with in everyday life, and the bigger evils that we see in the world. And I liked that contrast, and I think anything that dilutes that would kind of ruin it a bit. It would kind of take away from what makes Vecna such like a cool villain. And then one of my other top least favorite theories is, we touched on this a little bit, but the idea that 11 or one of the other major characters like will die in season 5 or has to die, or that like them dying or sacrificing themselves is necessary to defeat Vecna. I really don't buy into that theory. I think people put too much stock into Millie Bobby Brown's offhand comment about like, we need to start killing people off. It's like Game of Thrones in here. Like, she was clearly joking. But I could see somebody sacrificing themselves and then making a recovery. That I definitely could see. I think that will probably happen to probably at least one character, or something to that effect, or it might appear that that's what's occurred. But for them to actually die, I don't really buy into that, because like you, Ashley, I think a death needs to be meaningful in order to like serve a purpose in the story. And if it's not, I just feel like it feels cheap, and it kind of ruins the whole thing. And so I've heard theories, like people think 11's gonna die, she's gonna have to sacrifice herself, or Jonathan's gonna wind up sacrificing himself for Will, so Steve and Nancy can be together, or Murray's gonna wind up dying because people don't like Murray as a character because he pushed Jonathan and Nancy to get together. And like, I don't love that scene either, but I don't think that makes Murray a bad or uninteresting character enough to kill him off. I mean, there's a lot of things in those earlier seasons where you're like, would they do that today? Probably not. I also feel like the character has evolved like beyond that, or thought that like something's gonna happen to Will and he's gonna die, or people have said they're coming full circle, so there's gonna be like Will or Elle's gonna die, and I'm just like, I don't see it personally. I feel like that would kind of cheapen the ending, because even if they give everyone else a happy ending, it's like, well, they'll always be sad because of this loss. And while it is a fact of life, I think these characters have already dealt with so much death and loss. leaving them in a place where they still have to deal with that, I don't think would be satisfying. I think a more satisfying ending, like you, Ashley, I think is everyone gets a nice happy ending at the end of the show, and it's the ultimate theme of the show is about resilience and perseverance, and even though bad things happen to you, you can find a way to recover and move forward and have like a meaningful, beautiful life. And I find that to be way more moving. That's going to make me bawl way more than, oh my God, we killed so and so off. Um, I personally would find that more moving. Um, and related to that is the theory that Max will die or will not recover in a meaningful way. I think if they were going to do that, they would have done it in season 4. And Sadie Sink has obviously been filming. We got that video the other day. She's obviously been filming. They're not just going to pay her to lie in a hospital bed, so clearly something's going on. That would be a waste of her talents. And so the idea that they're just gonna like do all this stuff just to kill her off, I think would just feel really cheap. If they were gonna do it, I feel like they were gonna do it, they would have done it in season 4, and they have said they intentionally left it ambiguous, to bring her back in season 5, to kind of be able to still play with that. Or the idea that she won't recover in a meaningful way, that she will be permanently, disfigured or will not be able to live a fulfilling life. I also don't subscribe to that theory. Do I think that her recovery is going to be like overnight? No. Do I think she will deal with, the health challenges that come with something like that for the rest of her life? Yes, many people do in real life, but I personally see her storyline as they find some way to save her, and she goes through physical therapy and she goes through whatever she needs to do to get better, and she'll still deal with things, but she'll be able to have a meaningful life, and her and Lucas can get married and have a couple of kids, and she can open a skateboarding school or something, like she's gonna have a good meaningful life. So I feel strongly about that too. And another theory I guess that in a larger sense I don't really subscribe to, that's one of my least favorites, is the idea that there's like a big plot twist coming with the relationships on the show. Like, Byler's going to wind up being Endgame, or James is going to wind up being Endgame. For Byler, I can see what people are saying, and I see why that's important to people. But with what they've shown through all 4 seasons, to me it seems pretty clear that Malevolent are Endgame, and that Mike and 11 are kind of it for each other. I feel like they've been pretty strong on that one. So I feel like I said, if there's going to be a plot twist, I feel like you kind of really have to set it up. You have to do that setup to make it possible for there to be a twist. There has to be little breadcrumbs, and I don't see the breadcrumbs there. Likewise with like Jancy, with Jonathan and Nancy, it looked like they were going to be Endgame in season 3, and then season 4 happened, and it's like, oh, apparently we're putting her back together with Steve, and Jonathan apparently wants nothing to do with any of this. Okay. And yes, they left it open-ended. But I just don't, again, like the breadcrumbs, I'm like, if they're gonna, have them, work out their issues, and like if they're gonna be Endgame, I feel like they need to be season 4 needed a whole lot more breadcrumbs, and I'm just not seeing the breadcrumbs. So I don't think there are any big twists happening with the relationships of the show. I think what we see is what you get at this point. There's a few different ways they could go with the couples, and they're gonna go one of those routes. Do you know what I mean? The routes they have laid out. There's a few different options. They're going that way. I don't think there's gonna be some big twisty twist. Quite frankly, I don't think they have time for a big twisty twist. They already got to pack in so much of season 5. I don't think they have a relationship plot twist. I don't think they'd have time for that, even if they wanted to do it. So I feel pretty strongly about that. And then the last kind of, one of my least favorite theories is that there's going to be like some kind of massive time jump to the 90s before the epilogue. Like I said, I would love to see a flash forward to their lives in the 90s at the end of the show, but not before that. I feel like it would kind of disrupt the plot, disrupt the action. And again, I think they're going to end it in the 80s, the nostalgia, bringing it full circle. It's just an iconic part of the show. Plus, the other thing that gets me is that they jump forward to the 90s, the technology advances. And so a lot of the stuff that drives the plot of them not being able to contact each other in times of crisis would start to dissipate a little bit as the technology evolves. So I feel like to make those plots still work, you need to stay in the 80s. Like my friend and I have a joke about how there really needs to be like some sort of like mailbox that they all usually put like notes in that they can communicate with each other. So like everyone knows what everybody else is doing, kind of like they do in Little Women. Um, so I think that would also kind of create issues for the plot. I mean, it looks like there's going to be some type of time jump in season 5, but I don't think it's going to be as extreme as people are maybe theorizing it might be. Um, and then lastly, I have my honorable mentions, which is that again, in no particular order. First of which being Millie Bobby Brown and the other main cast members don't want to do the show or don't want to be there. I feel like their comments get overblown. If these people are very wealthy, this show has given them a platform. If they want to go off and just do other things and not come back, they have that option. They would not be there if they didn't want to be. Um, they've made comments, but to me, it's just, well, this should have been done several years ago because they lined up other things, and there's been COVID and the strikes, and they just kind of want to close this chapter in their lives. And I mean, fair enough. If something I was working on got delayed by like 4 whole years after a 3 year delay from the last one, like I would also feel that way. I don't think it's a reflection of them not wanting to be there. I think it's a reflection of Jesus Christ. Like it's, we're we're just trying to get to the end here. How many times have we postponed this? So I think it's just more of a reflection of that. Um, that some people feel that the first shadow of the play is canon. I personally don't feel it is. It doesn't seem to match the canon we have in the show, so I don't think it's canon. People sometimes say things about how they think Owens is dead. I also don't believe that one because the woman he works with is like smiling when she drops Joyce and Hopper off. She does not look like a woman who's grieving the loss of her boss. Um, and I think that would kind of, if the Owens is dead, that kind of takes away their kind of the person that they could have explain a lot of things to us as the audience. Explain about, Henry's past, about what he might be doing, about what Brenner knew. If Owens is gone, there's nobody left. And I feel like that would take a lot of exposition away, like a lot of their options in terms of like dialogue. Plus, I just find him an interesting character, and I think he adds a lot to the plot, and I find it very interesting. And I feel like writing him off doesn't really make any sense to me. And lastly, the idea that Eddie is Cass or will be resurrected in season 5 as a vampire, will work for Vecna, or will be resurrected and come back in some capacity. I could see Eddie appearing in flashbacks, but I don't think he's going to appear as like a regular character. If some of you may know, Joseph Quinn, the actor who plays him, recently signed on to the Fantastic Four and some other projects. So he's booked, guys. He's booked. So I could see him. I could see him coming back for like filming some flashbacks, but I don't. I don't see him coming back as like a regular character. I think he's too booked up for that. And they kind of talked about that going in, like he knew it was going to be like a one season. They've talked about that. Unlike the actor playing our guy, who apparently thought he was coming back, which is kind of sad, and a bit confusing for him. So those are my least favorite theories. Ashley, what are yours?
Yeah, so Jasmine and I kind of have some of the similar least favorite theories. Again, I mean, these aren't really in particular order, but I guess kind of piggyback off of what Jasmine said regarding Vecna is not the big bad, the mind flayer is really in charge. And what you were saying about, people, fans wanting, it to be revealed that someone else was pulling the strings of the mind flayer, and then we actually get that, and now all of a sudden, they don't want that. And I remember Jasmine, um, after season 3 came out, I remember the theories that flooded the internet at that time about this particular subject, and I remember just everywhere, there's big speculation of the mind flayer has to be a number, one of the test subjects, or a multitude of the test subjects that at one point died, and they even thought that about the Demogorgon as well. And when season 4 comes and that literally happens, that is literally revealed that the mind flayer, um, I guess is essentially a number. Um, and now it's no, we don't want that. Okay, well, you did before this. What's changed? And to me, like you said, Jasmine, Vecna being the big bad, and just Vecna as a villain, it's much more satisfying than literally, come out, uh, a bunch of dust particles, uh, being, the villain. I mean, you think about it, whenever we see the Mind Flayer in seasons 2 and 3, it can't even speak. It doesn't even speak. It's just like, it's just there, you know? And yes, Will is possessed, but as we know, that was really Vecna, operating through the Mind Flayer particles in Will, that was doing all that. And the fact that Will, while he's possessed, refers to it as he likes it cold. I think something similar happened in season 3 with Billy when he was possessed. Which season 3 is really when I kind of started to, kind of put everything together that a human was behind this. Uh, everything we'd really seen, especially since season 2, and then the stuff in season 3. And it turns out there was, or there is. And so I mean, could we be wrong? Absolutely. But I think at this point in the show, it would not be in their best interest to go all of a sudden flip flop on that. Um, and then another one is Karen Wheeler is Alice Creel. Like that one to me, I remember the first time that I saw that theory, and I was just like, what? Is this clickbait? Because there is no way. Because it was funny, like this theory came out like almost a year after season 4, had been out. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way that anyone's going to believe that. Well, people do. And that's very unfortunate. And I'm like, how did this even become a thing? I mean, Jasmine, like, do you remember when that came out? Like when it first came out?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I just can't remember. I kept thinking to myself, how did this even get started? Like, who sat down and watched season 4 and said, "Yep, Karen Wheeler is Alice Krill," and I'm like, yeah, number one, we saw like she's dead. Like we got a close up, she's dead. Okay, but also, how would that service the plot whatsoever? Like, I don't know if people, just got in their heads they want so bad for Henry to be, that much more connected to everything. But I mean that one's probably, I mean, that's just, I'll be honest with you, it's probably the worst theory I've probably seen to date, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's pretty far-fetched. It's pretty far-fetched. I mean, to be honest, I even find the, Henry being Elle's biological father a little bit far-fetched. I don't I can see that theory more, but yeah, Alice Creel, I'm like the ages don't line up. The um like, I'm like, how would that even work? You know what I mean? Like who was this kid raised by? You know what I mean? She obviously wasn't raised in the lab. Like he doesn't like Karen seems to have no clue what's going on. Or rather, she seemed to know something is up, but she kind of like looks the other way for most of the show. So it's like if she was Alice, she would know something was up. She would not do that, and it's like that doesn't really. It just doesn't make any sense. And I get people wanting it to be more connected because you know there were clues, there were breadcrumbs, but it's not as I think a direct connection. To earlier seasons. The fact that like we didn't know Vecna was gonna happen, right? Because it was like it was supposed to be a twist. So I could see people wanting to be more connected. But yeah, that just doesn't make sense to me either.
And then, like Jasmin, I don't think that 11 or one of the other major characters will die in season 5. Um, I think, kind of explained it all a little bit earlier. I just don't think, um, that number one, they need to die in order to be successful or for this to have a, successful ending. Um, but I think it's also because I don't want them to die. But yeah, I don't, I don't think that's gonna happen. Um, I don't think the the first Shadow play is canon. I've read the details on the play because I mean I know that it's supposed to be coming to Broadway in 2025, but for me, that's basically like a trip to London. It's still expensive, I'd still have to take time off from work to go see it. Um, and so I'm probably, unless Netflix ponies up and purchases the rights to stream it on Netflix, I'm never going to see this play. I'm never going to be able to watch this play. So I just went ahead and read all the details and stuff that I found online, and I do think there are some parts, some like very very few parts that could be canon, because they are kind of somewhat based on what we've kind of seen in season 4. But to say that the whole thing is canon, no, I don't think it is. And I know, and I think Jasmine, because I've read the details of the play, the big reason, especially now that people who have either watched the play or have read up on the play believe that the Mind Flayer is really in charge, is because of what they've read or watched in the play, and because Matt and Raw Stuffer said it's canon. Um, and I would just like to tell people, look, form your own opinions. We're not trying to tell you what to believe or what not to believe. These are just our opinions, our theories, and all that. But in the past, the Duffer Brothers have said that, oh, this is such and such is canon, such and such is canon. It's canon until we say it's not canon. And so I would just like to say, take what even they say with a grain of salt, because they're obviously not going to tell us, like, oh yeah, this is definitely, definitely canon. Um, because to me, I feel like, um, if it really were canon and something that we needed to see in order to watch season 5, I personally believe that it would be more accessible to the public. It's just my opinion. And it's not really, if you think about it. Um, and there's just some things in the play that just don't really make a lot of sense. When you look at the show, the TV show as a whole, and especially in season 4. I personally think it's a big, like, a big what if, like, maybe if things had gone a little bit differently, here's what it kind of would have looked like. And yeah, I don't think that it's canon either. Um, and then kind of my last one, I'm gonna veer from Jasmin here a little bit. I don't subscribe to I'm not a believer that Will has powers. Okay, I'm just not. Um, until I'm proven wrong. I think that they've had 4 seasons now to establish that, and they really haven't. And I know, you mentioned the thing about his neck, and I've seen others talk about that as well, and Henry with Soteria. But I mean, 11, that her neck doesn't do that, and she has powers. Um, I mean, I do think there's something with the neck thing. I mean, I feel like has to do with because Will was possessed by the Mind Flayer, and even Max in season 4 says like she can still feel him. I mean, she wasn't possessed by the Mind Flayer, like the particles, but I mean, Vecna was still entered her mind, and she says like I'm marked or something. And I don't know. I feel like Will is just fortunate enough, like he's alive to tell the tale. Um, and I feel like that's probably going to be Will's biggest purpose in season 5 is giving them a forewarning. Maybe he'll actually do that because in season 3 he did not. When he could have, when he felt the presence of the mind flayer, what we now know as Vecna. Could have said something, but he didn't. I don't know if it's because he, you know, it made him fearful. I don't know. I'm also speaking of Soteria. I'm really looking forward to getting more context on that as well. Like what it is and all that. But yeah, I don't. I'm not a believer that the will has powers because to me, um, I don't know. I mean, it would just feel like it would take away um from Eleven, who does have powers. I just feel like it would just be a little bit too much, and too much too soon. And like, I think he will help Elle save the day, but I mean, they're all gonna, help her save the day. I don't think it's like just him specifically. Um, and like with the stuff with the upside down, I don't really think Will has any control over that either. Just based on things from season 1 that we know. Um, and Will to me doesn't really strike me as that type of character, you know, who would do that. I mean that's just my opinion. Um, and then some of my honorable mentions, like Jasmin. Um, like I don't think Eddie is Cass or will be resurrected in season 5 as a vampire and will work for Vecna. I think it's pretty obvious who Kaz is in Stranger Things. Like when people start saying this about Eddie, I'm like, did you not watch episode 7? Because like Kaz in D&D portrays Vecna. Did 11 not literally just do that? Um, like Eddie, as far as we know, like Eddie has no ties to Vecna other than he saw Chrissy Cunningham get murdered in his trailer by Vecna, who he didn't even know existed at the time. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you, Jasmine, I mean, the Duffers have said like we knew he was going to be killed off, like, um, and I think we could see him in flashbacks, but he's not going to be there, present day, resurrected from the dead or anything. And then I don't really think that Callie will return or that she must return in order uh, for Elle to defeat Vecna and the Upside Down. Um, I mean, I hate that things went the way they did in season 2 with Callie, and therefore we have not gone back to her because of that. I mean, granted, I mean, I wasn't really crazy about her to begin with. I mean, I do think there's redemption for people, and Callie included. But I mean, it would be at this point be so out of left field that I would not. Well, I want it to be 11 and our characters we've have been there from the beginning to defeat the upside down in Vecna. Um, so those are all my least favorites for now.
The list is ever growing.
Yes, I'm sure will definitely be more, especially as we get like trailers and stuff.
I was gonna say when we get a trailer.
Because I know even then there's gonna be really really awesome theories, but also
Yeah.
really dumb ones. Like I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but after the season 4 trailer came out, the first one, when we saw our first glimpse at Vecna, people were out there speculating that this was Billy or Hopper. I'm like, What?
I missed that, but oh my God,
It
no.
was it was it was pretty bad, Jasmine. It was pretty bad. So hopefully it won't be that bad, but there's definitely going to be a mixture of really awesome theories and really bad ones.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there definitely will be. I'm kind of getting I would kind of imagine for the trailer we might get something similar to, when we got the first trailer for season four, when you and I did our predictions, there was a lot of scenes in that trailer where it's kind of like, oh, I think something might be up here. I don't know what's up, but I think something is up. Um, they're hinting at something here, but they're not telling us what it is. And people are like dissecting every moment. And I could see them, I mean, that's what a good trailer does, right? It makes you, ponder things, but it doesn't give you all the answers. And I'm predicting that we're gonna get the trailer will mostly be full of moments like that. And there'll be a couple of things like, ooh, we might get a glimpse of who Lyndall Hamilton is playing. Or I don't know, we get glimpses at, people's new looks or something about I don't know, something about Hawkins. But I don't think we're gonna get too many definitive answers. I think it's more just gonna be like, hey, look at this. What's happening here? And people will, of course, run wild. And like you said, there will be some great theories and there will be some really dumb ones.
Yes. So kind of like to close out the episode, just want to talk real quick about something I've had on my mind for the last few weeks. And as we get the behind the scenes content, starting to put together some of the pieces of the puzzle as best as we can. I just kind of had some quick thoughts I wanted to share on what I think could happen in season 5, episode 1. So we already kind of know what the cold open is going to be. It's going to feature Will in a specific moment when he was in the Upside Down. And something that happened in that specific moment. So we already kind of know what our cold open is going to be, and so we're going to do that. Then we know we'll get the opening credits, and then I believe that the first 10 to 15 minutes after the cold open, I think they're going to be fast paced. Um, and I think we're going to start off, with a bang. We're kind of sort of going to pick up where season 4 left off. Maybe not at, the exact with the exact scene of them at the hill, but maybe, um, they're scrambling, figure out what's going on, and you know, maybe there's some sort of mini battle between 11 and the upside down forces, and then maybe they succeed, but only temporarily, and then after that we get maybe a little bit of a time jump, and then the episode at this point, kind of slows down for a little bit, gives the audience, a chance to, catch our breath, um, and really establish the plot of the season. And then after that, like towards the end or at the end of the episode, then something bad I think is going to happen, that sets the season into motion, and I feel like maybe this is with the crawl takes place. Maybe we see Vecna, coming out or whatever. Um, so those are kind of right now my general thoughts. I'm not going into too much, detail. Um, which I mean, there's not really much detail because we don't know what's going to happen in the episode. But that's just kind of how I feel like the overall flow of the episode is going to be. Jasmine, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think that's possible. I think we've kind of seen them follow that kind of a formula kind of before. And I think it makes sense to have some kind of action. I'm not sure if kind of the mini. I think there's going to be a lot of mini battles this season. Are we going to get that in the first episode? I don't know. Originally, they said very pedal to the metal for this season, but now we're getting pictures of them like chilling in high school. So, like, I kind of thought it would be a mix, but I think it's going to be a lot more of a mix than we thought between like kind of the normal life and the kind of supernatural. But I could definitely see a mini battle, I think there will be a lot of them, so they definitely could have one in episode 1 or 2. Definitely. Again, something where they succeed temporarily, or I could see kind of like a stalemate situation as Elle kind of like furthers her powers. Kind of a stalemate where like nobody really won or lost that one, but we're all just gonna go back to our sides now. Kind of a thing. I definitely we're gonna pick up where season 4 left off. Because there's so much they need to address, and they've said it's gonna dovetail, and to me that's where the action is. As we get into that episode, you skip over it, and I feel like we're going to feel robbed as an audience. And yeah, that kind of ebb and flow where it slows down to catch our breath, and then establish the plot for the season. And I also think, specifically in episode 1, I think we're going to get probably in that kind of middle or later chunk. We're establishing the plots in terms of what are they investigating this season, what's the battle plan, what's Vecna really up to, like kind of progress been made on that. And we're also probably going to get a good sense, I would say, of where the characters at relationship wise. Where are the friendships at, who's with who, what's going on there. I feel like they kind of have to establish that during that first episode. Definitely by the second, otherwise I feel like the rest of the season would drag. I feel like they kind of got to land the plane, they got to nail the first episode. If they nail that, they're good. So yeah, I could definitely see it kind of following that pattern. And then, something bad happening at the end of the episode and setting everything into motion. I think would make sense as a jumping off point. And since we are bringing this full circle, season 1 starts with Will's disappearance, right? So there's got to be something bad. I'm not saying it's going to happen to Will, but just something, to set everything in motion, and I'm kind of picturing more of they're working on a plan and kind of gearing up and trying to figure out how much time they have before Vecna comes back, and then something happens. It could be with Vecna, it could be with the military, we don't know, but just they're kind of in the process of figuring out what they want to do or how they're going to handle things, and then something happens that kind of like spurns them into action. Because they followed similar kind of patterns in past seasons. So yeah, that's kind of that's what I'm sort of picturing for the opening as well.
So, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about, Jasmin? Or are you ready to call it?
I think I'm good. I mean, I think we've got lots to discuss for our next bonus episode that we're gonna do for all the lovely behind the scenes pictures we have gotten. So I think I'll save everything else for our next bonus episode.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and make sure you tune in next time on the Ham Radio podcast.
And that's our show. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Our theme music is provided by Neon Knights, and our sound editing is provided by Ashton Cooper. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ham Radio, a Stranger Things podcast. Please join us next time, same dial, same time.
Over and out.